You're listening to Robin Flan's Drummer Interviews, the #1 drum radio show in all of Los Angeles,
the world, the galaxy.
Hi, this is Robin Flans with Robin Flans Drummer Interviews, and this show is sponsored by ePad Practice Pads, the only practice pad with Enduraflex playing surface, and Robin Flans Media, where you can contact me for my writing services. And today's guest is Pat Mastelotto, who I have to say has more projects going on than I can actually keep track of. He was at the forefront of a very creative use of technology, and he just in a lot of bands that were very progressive and still are the bands that he's in. It just a lot of music. In fact, preparing for this interview, Pat, and listening to the immense amount of music within the projects you're involved in, all I kept thinking of is, how the heck do you keep all that music inside of you? And I mean, how do you keep it in you and at your fingertips, sort of pun intended?
Well, first off, why are you just #1 in LA and the world? What are
well, I think we just lost Pat, and maybe my question overwhelmed him. So hopefully he will call back. And I'm not sure what he was going to ask me. That was sounding a little daunting. So I'm hoping that we hear right back from Pat in one moment. So Pat is, okay, here he comes. Here comes Pat. So Pat, I don't know what
Hey, Robin, I'm back.
I don't know what happened. We lost you.
I don't either.
But what were you going
to... I'm trying to stay stable. I'm trying to stay in one position so my GPS doesn't fall off my phone.
Okay, so yes, just for those who are listening, Pat's in Texas. And, so what were you going to ask me?
Well, two things. You asked me, how do I remember these things? And I just do. I don't know how to explain that, but ever since I was a kid, once I learn something, then it usually stays with me, and I can actually play most of the songs and the arrangements from my high school band if I had to. I think I could pull it off.
Whoa.
So they're still there. The problem, if there is a problem, sometimes the parts change over time, and I remember them the way they were, the one version of the band performing the tunes. So I have to remember that every time we get back together, that these are my parts now.
Oh. Now...
Yeah.
Do I recall that you don't read?
That I don't read? I don't read very well.
Okay.
Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
I read a little bit, and actually Gavin Harrison mentioned at the last rehearsal, he goes, Pat, you actually read pretty good, because we did have to write out some parts. I just don't do it very often.
Okay.
And I get kind of flustered and confused with the rests. The notes are not hard to read, the durations and the placement. But once we start to get into rests and dotted notes, I start to get a little confused, where some of the parts aren't really that complicated. To read, you just have to have memorized what those phrases look like.
Right.
The most telling one for me is a Charleston, which is like a dotted quarter note. There you go, Charleston. And now anytime I see that, that's easy. But when I was a kid, that always used to fluster me to see that. But that's one of the most typical beats a rock drummer will play. So getting used to those things.
I was just overwhelmed with, I guess, you're in so many projects. So, okay, so give us actually a rundown on your current projects? Because I know, is it fair to say that your main gig is King Crimson?
Absolutely. I would definitely, without a doubt, put King Crimson is the cherry on my cake there. It's the greatest gig in the world, and we have Gavin Harrison, Jeremy Stacy, and Bill Rieflin, three other great drummers in the band. So there's a lot of camaraderie and a lot of musical creativity and a lot of I get new ideas. I get pushed by my buddies to develop new things and learn things that they're able to do. So it's a great workshop, environment for a musician to grow up and work in. It's just the absolute greatest.
Well, okay, since you've gone
a creative situation.
Since you've gone down that road, we'll table the rest of that question for a minute. You've gone down that road and working with three other drummers in an ensemble is more than I can even imagine, and it's highly unusual. Do each of you have a defined role within the music, or does it vary from moment to moment? Does it vary within the framework of the band? How does that work?
Right. It's a very unusual situation. And, I mean, playing with one drummer, two drummers in a band, but one other drummer is one thing. But once you add that third component or a fourth, it really it creates a lot of problems.
Yeah.
How do you make space? How do you make space for each other?
Exactly.
And there is no one preset rule to the way we do it, but there are, the details of the way we play and our personalities that sort of make us each more applicable to different types of music, different forms of music. So the music pretty much dictates how we'll chop the parts up. And then we just try to keep it spread out to everybody's involved as much as possible. And then besides, that's the current King Crimson we're talking about. There's actually a box set coming of the Crimson from about 1997 to 2004,
right?
And that is being worked on right now as well. So that's something I'm a little bit involved with. There's some mixing issues going on and stuff like that. So I have about another week before I go to Europe to start the Crimson tour. So we're working quite a bit on that material from what is it? Gosh, almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so that'll be coming soon, and I put some new acoustic drums. The Construction of Light record was an electronic drum record, mostly V drums, played V drums and D drums. And I put acoustic drums back on the record the way that I would like to have done it in the first place.
Oh, so you've gotten to do a sort of a reboot.
Yeah, so it's going to be quite different. The box set, I think, will have some of the original versions remixed and things like that, as well as some new versions with new drumming on some of the same performances that we had from around 2000 or 99.
So when you work, I mean, was this, I mean, obviously this was Robert Fripp's vision, was having, multiple drummers.
Yes, absolutely.
And you're working within that vision. So do you actually work out the tunes as the tunes get, presented to you? Or, I mean, how does it work?
Well, the repertoire is huge. We're doing Crimson material now back all the way to 69 since the first record. Now, most of that stuff hadn't been played. Like, Robert is very cool about when I became the only drummer in the band in 99, he didn't want us to do the older material, the older Crimson classic material, because that was not material that Trey Gunn or myself were involved in.
Right.
So he said, let's just write more new material and do improvisations on stage and whatever we need to pull off a show, but let's not focus on all the old material that you're not historically tied to. But that's all changed with this band when we have Mel Collins back in the band and such a big lineup we can really take on anything from the catalog.
Cool.
So we're playing Epitaph and Schizoid and Court of the Crimson King and Moonchild, things off the first record that were really never played for the last 40 years.
Wow.
And we're doing a lot of material off the Lizard record and off the Wake of the Poseidon. What we're not doing is material from the 80s band. That was the band with Adrian Ballou.
Right.
And Jacko is not that comfortable, and Adrian's not that comfortable with him trading off those songs. So right now we're not doing any material from the 80s version of the band except for Neurotica, Discipline, and Indiscipline, which we've fairly changed around quite a bit.
Okay.
So when we go to look at a new song for Crimson, it could be a new song. We have several new pieces that go under the moniker of Radical 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't really keep up now. I get confused about which is which. As they get rewritten and the modular pieces start fitting together in different structures. But essentially, like we just brought back a song from 2000, which was a song that I played on the original version. So Gavin and I spent a couple days at Gavin's house going through that drum arrangement. Gavin had a lot of great new ideas, and we inserted those. And then we sort of try to decide who should take each part. Like I mentioned before, just so things get spread around nicely and everybody gets a chance to play. And we spent a couple days like that, working on several tunes, but mostly on this one newer piece for the band. And then we had, that was at Gavin's house. Then Gavin, Jeremy, and I went over to a small, dingy rehearsal place. Sort of reminds me of Mates or Cole or one of those places that you see around Hollywood. Hollywood. But this was in London, and so the drummers, no microphones, we just set up in a circle and we could talk and try things and say, well, what if you take this part or I take this part? Some things look good on paper, but then when you start to play them, it doesn't really work out.
Right.
So we can go through all that procedure without the other guys in the band. So we do something like that every year when the band rehearses. We've had about a week like this where the drummers are alone, and then when we come in to play with the other guys, we're pretty much up on our feet. We're up and running and can play the song with or without the guitars or other instruments.
Right.
So we give them a nice steady thing that they can develop their parts on top of, instead of us all coming in confused about what they form
right
and stuff like that.
Wow. Okay.
And
Wow.
And then those things get detailed out, Robin, as you can imagine. Every night you play the material, you do a little thing one night, and somebody replies to it, and the next night you go, oh, wow, that was a thing yesterday.
Sure.
Could you do that again? And I'll do that thing I did after it again. And things just keep snowballing.
Yeah.
So we're like 4 years into this version of the band, I think. Robert called in 2013. We toured U.S. in 14. Canada, Japan, 15 or 16. Came back to the States in 17. This will be our 5th year.
Wow.
Of this band. So the repertoire, I think we're probably around 40 or 50 songs.
Wow.
And as you know, some of these songs are epic. A song like Starless, or Larks, those are 7, 10, 12-minute songs.
I can't even imagine. I mean, and
it's very typical. It always has been a typical thing with Crimson. Is how untypical it is that the parts that repeat generally do not repeat the same. They'll have a couple beats chopped out, or they'll, extra beat added, or a different chord change, so there's very little of the Crimson material that follows the sort of A B C form. It's always A B A/2, B/2. So everything gets, I think we used, that's another great thing. When the drummers get together, we can identify what are the sections, because so often with instrumental music, I may be calling something the chorus that you call the bridge. So we get confused with the syntax of where the parts actually are. So, but sometimes we're down to using letters, Q, Y, Z to define all the different sections.
Well, it definitely keeps you on your toes, I must say.
I've actually heard Robert Fripp mention that's stylistically part of Crimson's writing, because Robert wanted to make sure that he didn't get too,
complacent,
too sleepy on
Yep.
stage. If he puts those traps in for himself, we actually call them the landmines. They're sort of the crimson landmines, because a lot of times we have a really good show, and then you just step on one landmine, and that's the thing you remember the next day. That frickin' mistake.
Yep, I bet. And so then the need for you to create Stickmen. I mean, what prompted that project?
Okay, well, Stickmen was Tony's idea. Tony Levin.
Okay.
We've been playing quite a bit together, and this was it's over 10 years ago now. It's around 2007-ish. Tony was going to make, I guess it'd be about his third or fourth solo record, and he decided he wanted to do it primarily or entirely on the Chapman stick.
Right.
And he rang me up there. It was around the holidays, 2007, I think, and he said, "Hey, would you make me some drum loops, up tempo, sort of like stuff that could be used in video games?" And he mentioned a band, Atari Teenage Mutant Ninja Fan Club. I forget what they're called. They're some crazy band. They were sort of square pusher-ish, high level electronica. So I tried to take some of those ideas that he was into, and I made some drum loops and samples, and I did most of those sort of in song form. I didn't just give him back a 4-bar loop. I gave him back a 4-minute song with sort of an A and a B and a C section, and I might put some electronic drums and then play acoustic drums and then add some percussion. And so there was maybe 3 or 6 or 10 components that then I gave back to Tony, and he could just chop them up as he liked. He could mute this or use that, or take this from the middle and put it at the front, or whatever he did. And he created that record called Stickman. And then he rang a few months after that, or later that year, to do some shows. We're going to open for Eddie Jobson and his new version of UKC that had Marco Minimum.
Right.
And so we did some shows there. We started to play live, and we enjoyed it. We played a lot more. We've now made about, I'm not exactly sure, we've probably made about 4 or 5 Stickmen studio records, plus we have 4 or 5 live and compilation and alternative mix versions of the records. And we'll be touring quite a bit this year. We toured, let me think, it was just a month or so ago. Yeah, it was in March. We did about 25 shows in Europe, and we'll tour again this August and September. So Crimson will be in June and July, and then I'll flip right over to go to South America with Tony.
Wow.
And Stickman, that's Tony and Marcus, and then our sound man, Robert Foster.
So how does that...
we're hitting... Go ahead.
So how does that creative... I mean, what does that creatively fulfill in you, say, as opposed to Crimson?
Well, with Stickman, I mean, most of the writing is generated by Tony or by Marcus, and generated separately. Sometimes we're all together. In fact, we started the band all together with Marcus here at my place in Texas, and spent about 4 days together and got 3 tracks out of that first meeting. Some of those pieces, 2 of them, Crack in the Sky, we still play that live. It's a really nice piece, and that was probably the first piece we actually looked at each other and put together. But the majority of the writing comes from Tony or Marcus, and then they send ideas and we pass them around, and as either one of us does overdubs and changes things, and the next one replies and responds and makes things based on that. And we also, when we tour, we try to always have at least 1 or maybe 2 sections even that are improvisational in the show. So we're always looking to make something happen on stage that pushes us out of our comfort zone, but it also helps us create something new. And specifically for this tour, we're coming up here August and September, we'll have David Cross with us as a 4th member. David Cross was the violin player with Crimson on Lark's Tongue and Aspic and Starless and Bible Black. And we did a few special shows with him in Japan about 3 years ago, which were recorded and released as a record called Midori. And then there was quite a few people asking us to tour together, but the visas were an issue. So this South America, Central America tour we're going to do is the workaround. We can't bring him to the States, but we can we can bring him to Mexico City and Buenos Aires and Brazil, and
Okay.
we'll play a lot of shows down there with David.
Okay. And so, you were mentioning all the loops and excuse me, all the loops and the things like that. So, that brings me to what I said in my intro about you, the technology and the sounds. I know that you were a forerunner in all of that, and so I'm wondering.
Well, it was quite different then, Robin. When I in the late '70s, I moved to LA around '73, and I probably met you somewhere in the late '70s or early '80s. I'm not sure.
And you were already doing it.
Well, I was trying. I had a dream of coming to LA and being like a session musician, sort of. I didn't quite know what that meant, but somewhere between Russ Kunkel or Keltner or Hal Blaine, people that would show up on a lot of records. Actually, Jim Gordon was a big influence on me. I thought he was, wasn't familiar with who the guy was as a person, but his drumming, I just always loved his drumming.
Sure.
And he showed up on so many records that I loved. And I thought, well, that's the greatest, man. If you could be in like 5 bands, be playing with Jackson Brown today and James Taylor tomorrow, and on down the list, play with Joe Cocker and just moving around from Harry Nilsson gig to this, just the greatest selection of songs. Because I think essentially that's what my drumming has always been about.
Right.
Is songs.
Right.
I never flew off trying to chase a Buddy Rich dream or a drum soloist or a clinician or any of that. I can't do that. I can just sort of, when I'm lucky, I can get inside of a song and help create a drum part or a rhythmic landscape for a piece of music. And that's what I enjoy doing. And I think one of the reasons I can work so much is I have a studio in the house. Back around the days of the Rembrandts, which were kind of I did Danny and Phil's solo records, and then they became the Rembrandts. And
right.
We did the second record. We did the first record in Danny Wilde's garage. We did the drums in Danny Wilde's garage. We did the drums on the second record in my garage. And that's when I started to acquire more microphones and mic pre's. And the Blackface ADATs were coming out there in the early 90s. So I was able to transition, into having a home studio. And then I was lucky about almost 20 years ago now, right around 2000, I have a neighbor. I moved to Texas in 93 or 4, and I have a neighbor here who had a online session company called E-Sessions, and she bought me a Pro Tools rig so that I could be one of her guinea pig tester, people involved in that project. So I could not have afforded it. At the time there, I'd just gone through a divorce, but she set me up with a Pro Tools rig. I already had microphones and drums, so put me in a position to creatively record all the time. And I think when you mentioned back in the 70s and stuff, that's sort of where I was at, although it would have just been a cassette player in my apartment, but always trying to find a way to overdub and play with sound. And technologically, a lot was happening there right around 1980, 82, maybe. That's when I met the Misters, and they had been auditioning drummers for so long that they bought a Lynn drum. And when they'd auditioned drummers for a year, and they used Mike Baird and Vinny on some of the earlier tracking, but they'd also been writing a lot with the Lynn drum.
Right.
And I went over to audition and actually kind of got the gig there during a lunch break. I was working a straight gig out around Lancashire and Vineland.
No.
And it was me and Cliff Martinez and Robert Williams, 3 drummers, all out of work, sitting there licking envelopes or stamping envelopes or doing that kind of thing. And on lunch break, I shot down on Ventura. It was a rehearsal place around Colfax, and I was bringing James Rolliston, the bass player. James Rolliston was a good buddy of mine then, and he didn't show up to audition, so Richard Page pulled the bass off the wall at the rehearsal place just so they could audition me, and things got on, just right away. We were playing, and the manager and Peter McKeon, who became a producer on the first record, all these people kept walking in and going, "Boy, 4-piece, we love it."
Wow.
So the guys actually gave me the Lindrum after that first audition. They told me to take the Lindrum home because they didn't need it anymore. So that upped my game as far as technology goes. Suddenly I had a $2,000 or $3,000 piece of drum machine there that I wouldn't have been able to afford in those days.
Wow.
But as you know, the technology where things are now, it makes me laugh to think that I was a very techno drummer.
I know, but you did a lot with the very archaic tools that, listen to Kyrie. Some of that was production and some of that was you. You worked hand in hand with the producer on creating the amazing soundscape of that record.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But now, you could probably do more with an iPhone, but I can't really even get my apps to load. I'm like grandpa with technology.
Oh, I find that hard to believe. I do, and I have to say that I listened to an interview to where you said that you had a few lessons with Joe Porcaro, and he told you to go be something else.
Yep.
That's unbelievable. And well,
it's not that unbelievable, Robert. I'm not that good. I've just done it a long time, and I've gotten into some good situations. I think Joe's assessment was accurate. I did not have good time, or I still don't, and I did not have chops, and I still don't. And, I didn't read. A lot of things Joe pointed out. I was about 17, and he just suggested, your love for music could take you someplace else. And I did go take some engineering classes and thought about doing other things besides drumming. But I just kept at it, and, it worked out well for me.
It didn't discourage you?
No, it was, a little discouraging, but also it was motivational. And then as time goes on, I have to be honest and realize that he's right.
Oh God, Pat. Okay. So
I think every drummer, every musician knows that, man. When you hear the tape, when you hear playback, and it sounds crap, and you go, how the fuck did I not hear it when I played it? How come it didn't sound like that to me in the moment? And then, it's really a telling thing for a musician to hear playback.
Well, you obviously upped your game, because I don't think Robert Fripp or Tony Levin would have that in a band. So what did you do to up your game?
I practiced a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I did practice a lot, and I went back to school when Crimson stopped in '97. I did 3 years with Bill Bruford, I guess, 94, 5, 6, 7-ish, and then we paused, and I thought we were going to take a 1-year break and be back to work with Bill. So I immediately went up to UT. I'm living near Austin, and tried to get in the percussion ensemble. I ended up taking Middle Eastern drum classes and piano and voice, and I joined a local orchestra so I could play under a conductor. I'd never really, I was playing the triangle parts, the simplest parts, but just learning to read and play with an orchestra. I would do that like on Monday or Tuesday nights, go up and, it wasn't a touring situation, although we did have one big gig, which was funny. The soloist they brought in was the tuba player from the Marine Corps band, and he dressed underneath his tuxedo as a bumblebee, because we did Flight of the Bumblebee. He did it on his tuba. And I brought my daughter, who was about 3, to that gig, and she couldn't believe what her dad. Even I couldn't believe it, up there with the little tuxedo on, and then the dude with the bee antlers coming out.
I love it.
Anyway, that was a good year of lessons, and I learned a lot working with Bruford. Obviously, a lot. And,
what did you get from working with Bruford? What did you get from working with Bruford? That had to be amazing.
Well, a lot of those things are kind of personal.
Ah.
and the same with Gavin or Terry, but
okay.
both of them, they're all really giving. You know, you would think that that there's a certain amount of territorialism that comes with drumming. You know, it's my space and get out of my way. And it wasn't like that. Bill's very encouraging, and Bill is quick to point out that we each had our assets and liabilities. So, you know, much to my surprise, there were a few things I could do that Bill, I wouldn't say he couldn't do them, but he wasn't comfortable doing.
Okay.
So I did, you know, I did see, okay, well, there's a strength and weakness here. And as a casting director, if you think of Robert Fripp like that, when he puts players together,
right,
he was trying to get people who could play off each other,
right,
and I think, you know, that we do a good job of that.
Right. Everybody brings something different to the table.
I mean, Bill's most important discovery for himself, and that he shares with many musicians, is let the music rule. You know, stop trying to dictate your ideas onto the music. We do all do that as musicians. We have an idea, and then we come to the gig, and we're going to get that idea in there, and maybe that's not always a good thing. Maybe the song is better sometimes if you don't force that thing into the song.
Right. Well, okay. I think that, you know, everybody brings, what I said, something different to the table, which in turn brings something different out of you.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think I'm aware of, that I or any musician, you don't have to do anything that different besides put yourself in a different situation, and you will sound different because of the surrounding, you know.
Well, you definitely have a whole different, you have a lot of different playing, you know.
Well, my vocabulary is a little weird because I didn't necessarily grow up playing all the drum school rudiments and things like that. So my ear was just taken by radio.
Right.
And the drumming that poked out of the radio songs, or the different things you hear on radio stations.
Which is not necessarily what you're playing today.
Yeah, I'm a lucky guy. I'm in the place where I'm making a living playing pretty much what I want to play.
So back to my first question, which I never really let you answer, is what are the current projects that you're involved in, and what recording are you currently doing?
Current projects, you said?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you said current problems. Oh,
okay, yeah, here's the shrink.
We got Crimson's number one on my calendar,
right.
and Stickman with Tony, we fill in almost all the gaps, but there are still other gaps, and I've got a thing going called ORK, O-R-K, which is Colin, the bass player from Porcupine Tree, Colin Edwin, and two Italians, Les and Carmelo. And they approached me about 5 or 6 years ago to do some recording. And at the time I was really busy. I said, just can't do it, guys. I'm unavailable. And they said they'd wait. So they waited about 6 or 8 months for me. And I felt like, wow, I'm home now. I better do this. And the material was great. I just didn't see how I could take on anything else at that time.
Right.
But anyway, we made that record by passing files, and then we ended up doing a nice tour. We toured in all over Europe and South America.
Wow.
Again, the visas make it too big a hassle to come here, but we're working on our third record right now. I'll be back to that in about 15 minutes when we hang up. I've got to get a little bit more tracking done here.
Okay.
And send these files off. And right around that same time, I met a character in Slovakia, David Kohler. And David and I made a nice record with Paolo Ranieri. He's an Italian trumpet player. And we call that Comora. That record came out about 3 years ago now, and we're looking to make another record. It'll just probably be another year before we can do it. And that's much more experimental. I'm really fascinated with, like, I don't know, what's his name, John Hassel, or Niels Petromolov, the Southern Norwegian trumpet player. So that's sort of the spice that we have with Comora, where it's more ambient and electronica, and the melodies are more featured on the trumpet.
Okay.
And it's a really great, fun project. So we hope to do more of that. I still play with the California Guitar Trio. We haven't done it for a few years, but we're in touch and have things going. I just have been recording some stuff for Peter Banks, the guitar player that was originally in Yes.
Right.
He passed away a few years ago, and apparently he'd started a project before he died with David Cross. So Cross Banks, and I put drums onto one track. I did that a few months ago, and a little bit more overdubbing here in the last few weeks. There's something else, I forget the artist's name. It's to do with my friend Steve Ball and some of the electronic gauchos, the guys that are crafty guitar students down in Central America and Argentina, Mexico. And Alex, I can't remember what Alex's last name or what they're going to call the project. That's a really cool sounding record. I had just hooked up with this guy, Morph Beats. Do you know Morph Beats?
No.
He's a guy making kind of odd, not electronic, but acoustic instruments, metallic stuff. He sort of strikes me, he might be a biker type guy that's got a welder in the garage, you know. So he's made some really cool instruments, and I use a lot of this metallic stuff that he made on this Alex's record. You know what else I'm doing? This is a little bit off the beaten path, but there's some Mr. stuff floating around. We found a few unfinished tracks. This was back around Christmas, I guess, about 3 or 4 months ago. And we started to pull these tracks apart and figure out what we could do with them.
Oh, my.
So, there's somewhere between 2 and 6 songs right now. I put some additional drumming. I kind of wanted to just leave it as it was, but it needed a little help. It was never finished. And Richard is working on some new melodies and vocals. A couple of these were just instrumentals that we never finished writing.
Wow.
So we're working on this. It's sort of over at Slug's place now. Slug is Steve George.
Yes, I know.
Keyboard player, and Slug lives up in Sedona, which has the slowest internet in the world. So we've been passing files, but a lot of frustration there trying to download, a couple gigabytes of drums.
Wow. Well, very cool.
There's just lots going on.
I see that. Well, like I said, you are one of the busiest guys I know, and
we only live so long, It's I like to take advantage of every day.
Yep, I know. Like I tell my kids, you can sleep when you die.
Yep. Yeah, we heard it from Prince. I think it was sleepings for coffins and airplanes.
Oh, yeah, really. And so, where can people be in touch with you? Is there any place to do that? Is there? No.
Obviously, I have a website,
right.
www.patmastelotto, blah, blah, blah. And I have a Facebook.
Okay.
A couple of Facebooks, actually. There's sort of the official one and then a regular guy, Pat.
Okay.
And I guess that's where you have to go, or go to Crimson's DGM site. I'm not very good at keeping up all the web information, reposting tours. I use Squarespace on my website, and I locked out. They've upgraded. The OS is different or something, and then you go to try and update tour dates, and you can't get into your own web page.
Do you want to mention anybody that you endorse before we leave here?
Say one more time.
Do you want to mention any of your endorsements before we leave here?
My endorsements? Well, yeah. I mean, as long as you're asking me, I'm really happy with DW. It took me a long time to get there. John and the guys were friends. I used to live out in Calabasas and go visit him, and I got to say, John was always awesome at helping me anytime I ever needed it, regardless of whether I was an endorsee.
Right.
John was just a good guy, helping drummers.
Yep.
So I was with Pearl there in the early 80s, and then I went over to Yamaha for about 20 years, and that didn't matter to John. Anytime I needed help with something, he was there. A great guy. So I was really happy when, after Montanari, I switched over to DW there in the late 90s. And I've been with him ever since.
Okay.
And just building some new rack stuff to use with Crimson right now. I do Peisty as my cymbal sweethearts. And, nobody knows this. Nobody knows this but you and me and the guy at Peisty. But I just ordered a gong.
Ooh.
So I will have a gong on the next tour. I have sort of a sculpted piece like a gong on the last few tours.
Ooh.
But Robert Fripp had asked me a few times at last rehearsals, Pat, have you got a gong?
Well, Peisty definitely has a gong. Whoa.
Well, I didn't have one on stage, and so I'm going to have one on the next run here.
Nice.
They found one in Switzerland that they'll loan me. That's they're kind of expensive, So
how big?
Peisty's awesome.
How big is your gong?
Some other prototype stuff they've given me, and I'm really happy with Evans. Evans, my head people since the last 20 or 30 years. They're really great. Same with Vic Firth. Vic Firth's artist rep out there in L.A., Ben Davies. I'll give a shout out to Ben. Ben was my intern. He came out of PIT in L.A. and was looking for a way to move to Austin. And through friends, we heard about him. He'd also gone to engineering school, so I had him as an intern for about, 3 to 6 months here, being my slave. And one day Marco came by, Marco from Vic Firth at the time, and they hooked up, and that got Ben on his way into the other side of the music business,
nice,
the retail side.
Nice.
And and the list just goes on. Like this guy Morph Beats, he's great. Hammerax guy John Stannard has been great. He's made me some very unusual pieces. Matt Nolan, he's a cymbal maker. He's near Bath. He's got a kind of auto shop where he's down on the floor where it's dirt with an anvil pounding out cymbals with fire. It's pretty archaic, but he makes some really beautiful stuff.
Wow.
And I'm just trying something today called the Bop Pad. This thing, McMillan, they're kind of electronic guy. I think his name's Kevin McMillan. And I got it about a week ago, but I'm busy enough. Sometimes it's better for me to give a new piece of gear to a friend and say, why don't you go play with this for a week or two and then bring it back and tell me how it works. So I've got a buddy coming over in a couple hours today to bring back my Bop Pad and actually tell me how to interface it. And there's a lot of stuff out there.
Okay. Well, I will let you get back to all your work because you are one of the busiest guys I know, but I just am so excited that we got to catch up, and it's been way too long, but I can always count on you when sometimes I need to talk to you because you're always there when I call out, Pat, I got to know something. And And it's nice to know that once you're friends, we're friends, and so thank you.
Definitely, like strange and uncertain times we're in. So it's nice you can have a phone a friend number there.
I know it. Isn't that the truth? So thank you for being with us today, Pat, and thank you for everybody who is tuning in. And everybody, I just want to remind you that you can listen to my catalog of interviews at www.spreaker.com/RFDI. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at robinflansdrummerinterviews.com. Check out my classic interviews at robinflansdrummerinterviews.com. And stay tuned right here at Spreaker.com/RFDI for our next podcast. And hey, stay in touch with me at Facebook, Robin Flans Drummer Interviews. And Pat, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Robin.
Take care.
Talk at you later.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.